Hello, hello, everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks so much for joining our Friday Nooner. We are very excited to be joined today. Noah Hammond, back in the mix. Glad to have him on. Lots to talk about, of course. What a busy week that you, I would say, missed, but you didn't really miss. I know you're pretty much working all the time anyway, no matter where you are. But a lot of interesting stuff.
In a very different time zone.
That is true, but appreciate you making the time all the same. Lots to talk about, I feel like, just in general, between obviously different themes, but also just kind of, oh yeah, it's 7 p.m. That's not a.m., that's p.m. For those of you, I mean, people might be joining who don't know, who have not heard that you're traveling to see family. And
I can tell you how Friday night is, because Friday night's already started here.
Oh, how is it? What's the plan?
Dark right now. I'm sitting in the hotel room. I don't know.
Take a little snooze later. I guess, whatever. You know, it's nice to have a relaxing night every so often.
I'm
also,
going out after this.
Hitting the club, as people say. Good reminder, though, if you are joining, one, thanks for joining and happy Friday. But two, of course, if you've got comments, questions, anything like that, please pop them in the chat. I see Stevie in here, which is great. I see Skip in here, which is great. So yeah, if you have any good ones, feel free to throw them in as we kind of go along. But man, oh man, I feel like a ton to catch up on in general.
Where to start?
I think you've got to start. Yeah, it's got to be election. I think that's obviously the main thing. I feel like there are a ton of different avenues that we can go along on that side. Yep. I think broadly, maybe just kind of hitting it from just the market view. Seems like market, loving the results. I will say also credit to you, because I think you were more, I know it was sort of like very neck and neck, but it ended up not being neck and neck. Oh, you froze a little bit. But
sorry.
Oh yeah, it's okay. No worries. Not being neck and neck at all. And it seems like the market is loving it, which is great.
The market's loving the Trump news, or
the full red sweep, red wave. I don't know if it's sweep.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised. The market usually likes a mixed bag there, but I think there's an impression, right? And it's a good time to remind everyone that politicians lie, but there's seemingly an impression that yes, these guys are all going to come through here. The whole crew, from Trump to Doge, right? And really kind of clean things up and get aggressive with growth and do all of that. It's a lot to get done in 4 years, so we'll see. But you're right, positive reaction so far.
Yeah, 4 years is a long and short time, I think, in general. I'm just surprised, I think, by the strength of the reaction, I think, in general. But I guess not ultimately surprised if you are planning to kind of clear away some of the bureaucracy and red tape and kind of deregulate and all those things. I think that obviously goes hand in hand. We didn't have a bet on this coming into it, but did you think that the Fed was going to cut? I was also surprised on that front, too. I thought that they would. I know the consensus was like 99% that they were going to cut, but
yes, I thought they were going to cut. I don't know that I think they should cut, because I'm not entirely certain that it feels like, the inflation thing is sort of fully managed, but it does feel like things are better in that area, right? And the numbers are showing that it's seemingly better. I still thought that they would cut. Yeah, I still thought that they would cut. Okay. But it's a bit surprising when you do look at the market, and I know I'm looking at it with the included jump, from the election, but up 25% in a year. It was when I was looking at the numbers of where the market is this year, I thought, wow, it's pretty shocking. And it's not really the incumbent president, right? I guess that's the tricky part too, is they weren't voting for Biden. Mm-hmm. But if you're delivering 25% market returns and you get voted out, and again, I know what we went through inflation-wise, but that seems surprising.
I think it is one of those things where, while we are seeing like decelerating inflation and all those things, I think it is still like not returning to a level that people liked, which I totally understand. I mean, so I think it's probably just does come down to that, even if the market is having a really strong year. I will say,
or some of the votes maybe not entirely about inflation though either. So there's that.
That's true. There's a mix, but there's a mix of things obviously that lead to a vote. But I do think a lot of it is having carried the pinch of post-COVID for 4 years is hard.
Yep. And staying on the political topic for a second. So for someone who did think Vice President Harris would win,
sure,
do you, in hindsight, think Biden would have fared better and or won?
I think he would have fared worse. I think he would have fared worse, but also I mean, I don't know ultimately.
Let me ask you this.
I
It
thought it'd
wasn't
be
a
tighter.
concession speech by him, but did you see his, we're going to transition speech? He looked
He seemed fine.
fine.
He had a break. He had a few months to relax and hang out on the beach. I would feel fine too. Yeah, I don't
He
know.
seemingly had a pep in his step,
Yeah.
didn't seem to mutter or stutter much,
Mhm.
and was like, yep, that's how this all works,
That's how
and
the
we'll be
cookie
good.
crumbles. Yeah,
And
I don't know. That is
very
definitely not
surprising.
weird. Yeah, it's
It
surprising,
is
I think, in
weird.
general. But I think
It's
even
surprising.
if I think definitely with what he presented at the first debate, I don't think so. I think what he presented, more recently, maybe, but not really. Because I think ultimately a good chunk of the votes, and I'm sure, there are many reasons that people would vote for Trump Vance.
Right.
But I do think they weren't offering enough. Well, they were offering some things, but I guess it's again getting the things done was sort of the issue ultimately. So
Yeah, and I think
I
you're
don't know.
right. A little rest when just at that age, and maybe
Yeah.
with some of the things that he is dealing with, can do wonders. And so, it's good that he got that rest, and maybe that was evident in how well his speech seemed to go.
I have no idea, but I mean, not that it doesn't matter because I know he's still technically president for a little bit longer. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think a lot of people, even when Harris took over, were sort of just not wrote him off, but even before actually, I think had kind of written him off, which makes sense.
Right.
Um, So yeah, I don't know. Interesting there. I will say one surprising thing that might be interesting is despite the market being up 25%, I was looking over um, some of the like hedging elements just to kind of see, just because even though things seem very, very strong, always keeping an eye on, what kind of hedging opportunities there are. There are, there is an ability to have positive returns with the market up 25%, which is crazy. I was looking at year to date just to kind of look at that 25%,
Right.
and that's nuts to me. So that's also surprise. That was
Great.
my millionth surprise of this year, I think, in general.
And I feel like attribute that to, we have had a market of more winners and losers. And I think when you have that, right, and it's just not everything going up all the time, it can be a little bit easier. It's never easy to short sell, and for someone who takes that approach,
Jeez.
that's a little bit weird, right?
I,
Um,
prepare for anything. That's wild. I like the spooky vibes.
so hold
What's the
on.
elements? It's
I
okay.
don't know why the whole thing went down here.
I like the. Do you have any good ghost stories? I feel like this would be a great time.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Hang on one
You're all
second. Let me
good. You're
text
all good.
somebody here.
You're good. You're good. Let's see. All right, I'm seeing some interesting questions, which are good. Definitely a good reminder if you have any, throw them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. Um, but yeah, super interesting, I think, in general. Definitely has been interesting to see people's takes on kind of what contributed to it. But I wouldn't imagine, again, I don't want to make prognostications because I feel like I want to be out of that game, but seems like we'll see continued strength, at least in a handful of names as things go along. Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna jump up. Will you pull me out of the screen for a second?
All right, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Boop. Oh, wait.
Right. There's one
It worked.
light.
Just kidding. Wait, do you want to be out of the screen? Oh,
No, I just want to figure out my lighting issues.
it looks great. Low power outage. I like that. What is that? Is that tile mosaic in the background? Is that a knocking? I don't know. All right, anyhow. Let me
Back.
perfect.
Yes. So hedging in that environment, tough.
But doable, obviously, but I don't know. That one was just a surprise to me and kind of a cool surprise. So
Yeah. But I would say when the market's up 25%, no one is thinking about, the insurance or the insurance policies.
that's true, but I also really do think that that's the time. I don't know, right? Because I think it is a whole like blood in the streets versus
It
or
just
don't worry about
depends.
it.
It depends on what approach you're taking, right? When you have John Lewis on, he'll tell you that if things are awesome, and they do appear, at least market wise,
For sure.
mostly awesome right now, cannabis aside, obviously, but why why worry until there's something to worry about, right?
Yeah.
So it's a balance. So you just got to do your best. I mean, even going into the Florida vote, right? If you were worried enough, I mean, I guess there's tools out there to hedge that space with options or things like that. Those are definitely typically complicated for people, but yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. But I think it's, yeah, I don't think it's a time necessarily that people, or that I guess, am adding in that hedging element, but more being aware and kind of thinking about it kind of thing. I don't know.
Sure.
But you mentioned Florida. Do you want to talk Florida really quickly? I know people have been talking about it to death. I'm surprised.
I mean, one of the interesting things, at least I felt like I saw on Twitter, just searching over terms like pot stocks or cannabis ETFs or whatever. One, it was interesting to see posts that seemingly thought the downturn was more about Trump getting elected than them being aware of, what was going on in Florida. But yeah, I mean, I don't contribute any of the decline of the stocks in the cannabis space to Trump winning. It is all about, unfortunately, that Florida vote. And it sucks. I mean, I thought it was going to pass, but I thought it was going to pass because I'm looking at the polls and I'm looking at, the feedback, and I just thought it would be a more popular.
It was, to be fair, again, I think it got whatever, over $1 million people voting for it than against, but I know it doesn't matter when it needs to get that 60%.
Right. But it just seems shocking, right? You can't find 60%. And I guess, I don't know if I read this online or this was also sort of covered in the Dales report. I think Sheridan said something about sort of the Democrats not turning out to vote, right? Feeling like they're in the minority in that state and their vote doesn't matter. And those could have been a few more yes votes. So I don't know what data they look at, that helps them understand that. But doesn't matter. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
They spend a lot of money on it. It probably doesn't make me happy to know that there were guys out there like, a Don Murphy who was like, man, I don't know, and don't be so sure. Because it's frustrating, right? Like there's help out there for these companies. Yeah. And I know they've got to hire a firm and they've got to commit to a firm. And then that's sort of their ride or die in terms of getting, these things passed. But it's bad. It's a failure. It's a huge failure. It sucks. You do have to move on. But this is, I think it's going to sting for a while too, because there's nothing meaningful, obviously, on the calendar, right? I mean, Schedule 3 is there, but now we know it's a bit more of a pre-hearing hearing. I would like to think that things will continue to accelerate there, given what those agencies know about where Trump stands, on all of that. So, I'm not sure that I expect the head of the DEA to stay the head of the DEA. So what will she do before she heads out?
And who will she be replaced with, I think, ultimately as well. So,
well, and I would love to believe, and I think this would be true, but someone who's going to be way more favorable to something like that. Which it sounds weird, right? You would think a Democratic nominee, you would make that statement too, right? Which she is, right?
Sure.
To make that statement with whoever this person may be, that's going to be a Republican nominee, almost sounds surprising, but it also sounds like, FK Jr. will have a heavy hand in that selection. So I think that's awesome. So I think, I'm expecting good things, but same thing, I'm optimistic, nothing that I can point my finger on and say I have real direct evidence around it. So I do think that continues. I do think, with whatever Department of Justice, whatever Attorney General they put in place, it will probably be, or that person will probably be more favorable to cannabis. So I don't know. I am expecting positive things, and we'll wait to see if I'm going to be disappointed. But the expectation is, I think, a lot of positivity over this term.
Yeah, I think so. I think the one thing that is not encouraging, but I think there has been a lot of work for a lot of the companies to reach out. And again, we've seen evidence of that in terms of the Trump team educating, communicating, and kind of making a case there. So hopefully those kind of relationships and communication lines ultimately kind of strengthen. I don't know.
Yeah. I
But
don't know anything about, political relations as it relates
yeah.
to managing or running a company. But my perception is, and I think I've shared this before, is for a smaller industry, it seems too fractured and fragmented to be as effective as they could be. And they seem to not want to leverage tools that they could leverage that would, I think, would be very influential, right? And it certainly always takes money.
Yeah.
But I think no different than what you saw in Trump's political game of being on Theo Vaughn and being on Joe Rogan and doing all these things that are in different channels than a president might normally be in, but are clearly channels of influence, right? When you look at the viewership of, these various content people versus mainstream television, right? CNN or NBC or things like that. Why wouldn't you want your messages in and around those things? And why wouldn't you be leveraging all the various celebrity, whatever people that you can influence to get out there and vote and change elections?
I think that can be true, although I feel like we tried to see that happen a little bit in Florida. And I know, again, there could have been more celebrity. No,
Not
you don't
really.
think? Just okay. I think
I mean,
people.
well, give me the examples in terms of money and the participation by the entire industry. And then what were the celebrity things? I can think of maybe 3 big ones off the top of my head.
Again, I think that there's only a few, which is fair. But I think for like the Safe and Smart kind of campaign, I think obviously it was kind of overweighted in one company. But I do think that other companies did try to kind of come together to
I know.
pitch
I'm
in a
not
little
saying
bit
it was,
heavily weighted
I'm
for.
not, you're only restating what I'm stating.
Okay.
It was one big company and
Yeah.
a smaller amount from a few and
Sure.
a bunch of others who were doing other things in different areas.
Yeah.
Not well organized. So, hopefully it will be better and hopefully that will get better and hopefully they will organize better. Or not.
Or not. But I think some of them, what do you think about people or companies, I guess, building kind of alternative, what would you call that? Backup plans ultimately. I know like Curly
The
Farms,
hemp
the hemp
stuff?
stuff. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's smart. I mean, it's smart. And I would argue it was probably smart a year ago and 2 years ago and 4 years ago. Right. And so, yeah, Ken's right. So I think it's been a smart idea for a while. So honestly, if you're at this point and you're probably just starting, you're behind schedule. But again, always be careful of taking my business
or anyone's advice. Yeah.
in
Be
somebody
careful,
else's industry.
Yeah.
People are welcome to tell me to stay in my lane, but yeah, I would have been doing hemp like crazy. It clearly was not being stopped. And it just kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger, almost kind of behind the scenes, it felt like. And all of a sudden, bang, it's drinks everywhere and, gas station weed everywhere. So, yeah, they should be doing it and getting aggressive and tapping into every opportunity to generate sales. I mean, to kind of flip this to earnings announcements as of late. Bit underwhelming.
Yeah. I think that's a fair statement, which is unfortunate, again, coming off of a tough week.
Right. So they've got to find growth. I'm excited for what these companies are seemingly starting to do now, right? Terracin just announced their acquisition. I love that because that takes private company assets and then rolls them into their public company assets. So we should expect now a nice jump of revenue that's sort of naturally going to come from that acquisition. Green Thumb's announcement was very interesting. So you like to see that activity, though certainly it's another public company, but could be some interesting opportunities there. And I think like Boris Jordan talked about, right, it's maybe the time for some M&A activity. And then my only concern is that M&A activity isn't an offensive activity. It's a bit more about being maybe defensive, right, which is not where you want a growth industry.
That's true. But I think there's a time for offense and defense. And I mean, it's, I think, frustrating, though, because we should be incredibly able to be in an offensive position would be.
Right. But you're offensive typically when you're winning.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And
Yeah,
you're
no,
defensive when things are difficult.
stuck. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, that's true. But you got to survive through those times. But yeah,
You do.
yeah, that's true. Well,
So it's going to be a tough space for a while. I think hopefully, transition and everything goes smoothly. Not to get people too worked up, but don't forget we are coming off of having a former president slash current running president get a couple shots taken at him. So I actually don't think the insanity and craziness is over, but pretty happy to see the results of the election be this sort of landslide, got the popular vote, got, the electoral vote and down the line, seemingly, very,
yeah,
clear. Yeah. Clear message, I guess, is being sent by the voters.
yeah.
And so I think that toned down any craziness that might have, seen as a result. But, we're marching towards the inauguration and people are still processing their feelings.
That's fair, I guess. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. But I do think it does help that it's, yeah, like you were saying, kind of unanimous.
Yeah, it definitely does.
I think.
And so I don't, I think that's where my positivity for the space comes from. We actually may have a guy finally who will push real things through. We'll have enough of a change in the Senate, right? And that's going to be, we'll just see how it goes. I do, as I say the words out loud, I understand how improbable that is, right? A Republican-controlled Senate and what looks like to continue to be a Republican-controlled House. And I'm saying out loud, I believe they'll get, some progress done in the cannabis space.
I think it's possible. I do wonder how much it matters because didn't
And I don't think it
Pennsylvania go
happens
blue?
with lame duck, by the way.
Okay. You think afterwards? Well, we'll get some maybe different opinions. I don't know. We'll see. Don will be on Monday as well, so that'll be interesting.
Nice.
I think it's good to have like a little bit of time to not process, but kind of get a sense of where things are landing. I think we hopefully will have the House by then, even though it looks like it's heading red, but just to have it like clearly settled.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I saw a comment around SAFE, which I know people are sick of hearing about, but I think it does make sense to saying that they want to use their credit card points and continue to spend and consume and invest, which makes sense. I feel like Trump has talked about it, but I don't know not how much stock do you put in one important person's support of cannabis with kind of like what we saw with something like Florida? I don't know. Does it matter?
I put a lot in it, right? If the president says it's important, right? And he still says it's important after he's won, right? And got the votes for it.
Sure.
I put a lot of stock in it. It's such an easy thing for them to do. Now, I feel like what I've learned about the political process over the last 4 years is now when the other side knows something's important to you, they know what to try to hold you hostage on. And the same complaint I had with the Democrats, right? The first 2 years of Biden's term where he had control of both. And I'm like way, way disappointed, right? That they couldn't get more stuff done. I'll have the same view with these now Republican group where they've got all the majority they need. It will be so easy for them to follow through on those promises. I know every Republican doesn't think the same way, but there should be some really simple, easy things, including safe banking, including, I don't want to say the DEA Schedule 3 stuff is that easy, right? So many things can still pop up along the way that'll throw a curveball.
But sort of like common sensey things more than.
But yeah, safe banking and a Department of Justice memo are layups, for them to get done. So I don't know. I'm optimistic it will. I'll be optimistic until they demonstrate, like this last administration, that they can't get it done.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think with the Republicans and Democrats, historically, I feel like it's obviously been a dance between kind of pointing the finger at the other guy and saying, not us. But I think the MAGA element feels like a little bit of a departure from more traditional Republicans, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah.
You mentioned RFK. I know he had put out a tweet, I want to say yesterday, something this week at some point talking about, his plans on the health side of things. And I think he had talked or like made a list of things that he wanted to focus in on and expand access to. One was psychedelics. And I think that was like the first one in the mix. What's your balance there? Because I feel like it's a weird mix of anti-pharma, but also pro-psychedelics. But a lot of the I don't know. What's your thought
I
on?
feel like he has a fairly balanced view. I actually don't know that I see him as anti-pharma as much as I see him pro-choice, which is, maybe we should be doing more research on these vaccinations than we ever did when we made them mandatory. And it's not because I don't believe in vaccinations. As far as I know, they work fine. But, if through some research they're figuring out that there's this risk trade-off when you do this, and the more of a better understanding of what that risk trade-off is, and then maybe people were given choices, I guess, I don't know how that would work, that all makes sense to me, right? So he's not saying that he's against vaccines. He just wants to understand more what have been the ripple effects since we've approved all these things. And he said some stuff too that I didn't quite understand, that I guess at the time in which some of these were approved, there were different laws in place or different standards in place where these didn't have to go through some of the rigorous testing that medicines would go through today to understand, how they impact certain things. And so he's suggesting that those should go through that.
I would push back a little bit though, because I don't think, I know everyone talks about the vaccines being mandatory, but they weren't. I think it was still a choice that people could make if they wanted to get them or not.
And I think maybe it's less about it being mandatory, but more just about understanding the impacts of it. But I also think, if we are genuinely living in a world of my body, my choice,
but I think it still was there
in a lot of different areas, right?
That's true, but I think I think it was people's choice to take it or not. And I think
now it is.
You could say,
I don't think you can go to school without getting your kids vaccinated, or at least not public school. I could be wrong.
I don't know on that front, but I think like for adult people, I think people had a choice. And I think I had seen a lot of people saying that they felt like they didn't have a choice, but I think they wanted to.
You're talking about measles and those kind of vaccinations, right?
No, I was talking more about COVID, but I don't know if you're talking about additional.
I mean, people had a choice. Well, some people didn't. Some people got fired, right, for not getting it done.
Is that a choice that they took on to say, here are the...
No, they said they didn't want to get a vaccine, and then they got fired from the job for not getting one.
But I think it's...
So you're right, they had a choice with a effing gun to their head, right, to ruin their family's livelihood. So that's not really a choice.
But I think that's true of other things as well. But I think it feels different than like...
Of what? What else?
Foreign models where things were like restricting your movement.
Where else do people live with that kind of dynamic?
Oh, I think China's approach to it was pretty restrictive.
Oh, I thought you meant in the United States.
Oh, not in the United States.
Yeah, it doesn't matter for me, right? I don't even care at this point. It's over. People made their choices, and yes, people got fired for it, which means it was mandatory for them, even though they didn't take it. And so, yes, hopefully going forward, there's a lot more common sense, which again, I don't know that I expect common sense to happen in the next year or two. I think you're talking about changing
takes time.
The way big institutions operate, and that'll be challenging. And it'll be challenging to find all the answers you need in this time frame. But if they can make some good progress and some good changes, and at a minimum, I'd say it's a better attitude. I mean, the problem too is you get someone else as president next time, and they can undo all the things that this president does. So it really is changing the mindset of an organization like FDA or DEA. I guess FDA and sort of the right to try camp, right, relative to things like psychedelics. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a big change to change that mindset, I think.
That's true, but I think they're in the best position that they could ask to be in terms of getting there, hopefully. Yeah. Right, I would imagine. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. That's definitely one. I know psychedelics is also one to...
Yeah.
It has been.
But yeah, I'm in the camp of it's all good, but it's only based on what they've said. And we know from the last administration, they said a lot of stuff too, and it turned out to not be quite so all good. That's true. But I think I think the not lucky thing with this go around, but I do think you have, it's obviously a different team technically, but you still have the same president. So I think you can gauge to some degree the willingness to get things done. And I know he didn't do everything that he said he was going to do in 2016. Last time. But actually, the funny thing is, I don't know if I remember what did Trump not deliver on. I think like the wall making Mexico pay for it, like all that stuff. I think but like that, but it might have been like more of a joke, but also it wasn't. So I don't think so. Well, I definitely was not a I was not in the camp where I ever probably took stuff like that literal, right? I
Oh yeah, I
mean,
think people, it's a joke.
yeah. I mean, I just took it as we need stronger immigration, whatever, illegal immigration defense.
Yeah.
But yeah, but even that wasn't, I don't think, but the numbers still weren't that great while he was here, right? Or while he was president. They jumped up dramatically, I think, right after he left. But his numbers, I don't think were that far off of maybe where the numbers were under Obama, but I'd need to look it up and check.
I think for most of that stuff, sadly, there is more shared kind of,
Yeah.
not policies, but ultimately kind of policies than there are differences. There are definitely sometimes important differences, but yeah, like in terms of spending and all that stuff, I don't think that that's going to, I know that's one of the things that he's running on now, but I don't know. But that'll be another one interesting to talk about is on the crypto side. Do you have any thoughts? I imagine it's just going to
Talk about a
keep
happy
going
group.
crazier and crazier, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you talk about winners from the election, definitely Bitcoin and crypto. Holy cow, thinking of like Michael Saylor and MicroStrategies and just how that bet is unbelievably paying off for them. And not, I mean, not unbelievably, but it's just big risk, seemingly working well for him and that company. And yeah, same thing. If they stick to what they're saying they're going to do, they're going to have a much more open environment for crypto, which I think, you know, could be good and bad. Like most things, it's just, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm all for Bitcoin, and I think in general I'm all for crypto, but I'm just not all for the insanity that comes around crypto, right? With the various crazy coins
Or the
and
NFTs.
constant spamming, just even on the
Oh.
internet, right? It's just that stuff is so crazy. So, you know, but it's not like you don't have that in small caps or micro cap stocks, right? And so different areas of our own industry. But big winner for them. If they're going to buy a big reserve of Bitcoin, that price is definitely shooting higher. I'm not sure though, too, and I always go back to this. I'm not sure though if Bitcoin still has its mandate if they're cutting, you know, 2 trillion in cost from operating, you know, the United States, and we're going to dramatically cut back on stuff, and we're going to make energy a lot cheaper. If we do things that make this dollar stronger, and if we could get to an environment where we are making money as a country as opposed to increasing our debt, and you just did a few tweaks to, you know, how money moves, you know, electronically, it's not that hard to move money. You need Bitcoin.
I don't know. My real question is, does Trump or Elon or someone in the mix launch their own coin?
Didn't Trump? He did some coin right before the election, right? I think that was his backup plan for some extra cash or something.
I thought he had done the NFT stuff, like the trading cards.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Maybe he also did a coin. I know Elon is kind of like taken on Doge in some way, but I mean, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I doubt Elon launches a coin. And I don't put anything past Trump. Sneakers, coins, whatever it takes.
Yeah, sure. Watches. I mean, if Elon, I guess, gets in the government, is he allowed to launch a coin? Because I know he, I don't know. Oh. Yeah, I guess he would. Yeah, there's no reason not to.
On one hand, I don't see why not. They seemingly allow insider trading, so why not?
Congrats again to Pelosi getting back in the mix. Yeah, well, those are some interesting trades to track, I guess. All right, well then, what else has been? I feel like that's the main stuff that's really been going on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a, I hate to say it, but a bit of a depressing time in cannabis. With that being said, you know, as we watch earnings come out, we certainly want to start to get a better sense of the better operators who are getting it done. I'm not going to read too much in an individual quarter. Certainly we'll stand by for any M&A type of, you know, news for these companies, which I think would be good. Should be good. But otherwise, now we're waiting for the Schedule 3 hearing. I saw Nebraska did pass, which was awesome.
Medical, yeah.
But also saw North and South Dakota did not pass, which is interesting. Yep. But so yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough sled in the cannabis space for a little while until we get closer to some more meaningful news.
Yep, I think that makes sense. Also, I'm seeing a comment from Mohammed, which thanks Mohammed, on let's say you had a leveraged ETF and it was under $1. What would happen potentially is the
Just reverse
question.
split stock. Yeah, I think for any ETF, any stock, or most any stock, but certainly ETFs, as they get below certain price thresholds, and certainly $1 seems to be a reasonable one. There's not a requirement, but I think as we've demonstrated in other products and other companies have demonstrated in their products, you'll likely see that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense. Good answer. All right. Well, I was going to say, what are you going to do for the weekend? But you're going to be, I'm guessing, working and
I'll be working a little bit, seeing the area. All right. I'm visiting the college.
family.
And so, yeah, family. And I definitely got a lot of stuff to catch up on work-wise. But I'll be also keeping my eyes peeled. It'll be at the midnight or 1 a.m. here, but we have a NASCAR championship race this weekend. Don't miss that, Mackenzie.
I will not. Oh, shoot. I missed Ferrari had, I thought, good earnings. I meant to pull that up for you because I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
That's good.
I think, yeah. So that's good stuff.
Which is also interesting, right? I mean, again, stock market's been up nice. Inflation's been crazy. But as a measure of, retail and luxury good buying, I guess that's an indicator, right?
Category. Yeah. I
was going to say, too, what I'll be doing a lot of is eating in restaurants.
And sleeping at?
Hotels.
There you go. That's good. That's fair.
But yeah, that seemingly being a category of stocks that also are having an okay year. Probably also in part driven by inflation, though. Same with hotels, I think. All those things that you buy where the price starts to go up a little bit, the revenues will be higher. But
I think that's true. I know we've talked about it with Dan before, but I do think on the restaurant side of things, some areas really having a really, really tough time. I think I've seen a ton of like smaller chains or small businesses, which kind of sucks, are struggling. I do think fast food is having an incredibly tough time. They are such a value play. And
how much do you think that comes off of, a pandemic where, mom and pop shops had just the hardest time surviving, many closed to not open again. The ones who could make it were probably the bigger public companies, access to capital. And I do wonder if we're just not continuing to see some flesh out of those things of, just more of the smaller operators, right? Some of these have been chains that have struggled a little bit. I think in terms of what you're referencing, but I don't know. I'm just wondering how much of it is pandemic related and such a shakeout in an industry that got hit pretty hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there are for both sort of the hotels / restaurant side of things. I think that there are still rollouts from, even though it's been 4 years from the pandemic, just like the crazy stuff. I was just looking at the stocks on the move earlier and was looking at some names generally. And I think Carnival Cruise was one that was moving, or Royal Caribbean, Royal Caribbean. I can't remember. I think it's Royal Caribbean. But I still think there are some weird shakeouts in terms of how things are doing. And I think even though it's 4 years on, we're still seeing those impacts. Like, again, I think cruises got really, really hit for a long time. And I think they're just finally turning around. Airbnb having a tough time now, where I think it was having a really good time at the beginning of the pandemic. So yeah, I think those things change, and you got to find the pockets that work within themes. So that's
So yeah, I'll be doing a little bit of that this weekend. Actually, I think I saw someone mention the Cowboys. I'm not even paying attention anymore. I'm giving up. My season's over.
Oh, boo. All right. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I feel like you can. Are you a backup Commanders fan?
Not really.
Being close to DC? Okay.
I've got plenty to watch with all these crazy races.
That's true.
So I don't even have time, it seems like, to do that as much as I do. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of other things I think that are definitely demanding attention. So I think that makes sense. But it's, a little bit of fun in the mix as well. So fair enough. All right. I think that's good. Thanks so much for being on. Appreciate it. I know you were busy, so I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks everyone for being here.
Bye, everybody.
We will catch you next time. Thanks so much.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.